What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Hillside Garden. Just a little front porch update of some plants I got growing. These are a bunch of peppers. You see before you a bunch of different varieties: hot peppers, sweet peppers. Tomatoes as well, have in flats of tomatoes here. Some flats of peppers I grew from seed. I'm still trying to give away. I'm completely swamped with plants. But that's a good thing. So, anyways, I had a request for a video. So that's what this episode is going to be about. Is why do I have such success? Why are my plants better than theirs? That's not me bragging. They just want to know, what am I doing differently that they can do in their garden that maybe help them out? Maybe I know something they don't. So here it is. And I told you this before in previous episodes, but I'm going to dedicate this entire episode to vermicompost. Okay, so a lot of people might talk to you about worm castings, which is when they just collect, the castings of the worms. And to me, unless you have a very large facility, it's really impractical to get a large amount. So what I've developed at my place here is a small vermicomposting operation. I'm going to show you some of the finished products right here. All right, so I hope you guys can see that. Look how dark and crumbly this is. And this is almost, the consistency of coffee grounds almost. It just falls apart, super dark, super rich, has no odor to it whatsoever, just a earthy, very neutral, balanced smell. Just check that out right there. That is vermicompost. Okay, how's it different than worm castings or just straight up worm castings? Well, this is actually also part of a composting process that the worms are actually just assisting in, because it's a enclosed container. As the worms are breaking stuff down, it's going to leave the worm castings in there. So this is a mixture of compost plus worm castings plus all the little stuff. You can see a little worm right there. But what I typically do is when I plant something, like I did in all these plants here on the porch, what I'll do is I'll take a handful and put it down in the planting hole before I put the plant. So that's going to give it that slow release, natural organic fertilizer. Vermicompost is just loaded with nutrients, microorganisms, all kind of stuff like that. It's the best thing you can give to your plants, in my opinion. There's nothing better. Let me take you around back and show you how I make this vermicompost, and then I'll tell you a little bit about an experiment I'm going to be trying out with compost versus bagged garden soil. So stick with me. I'll be right back. All right, so check it out. Here at my vermicomposting operation here, and this is just kind of zoom out, an old kid sandbox that was left behind. So I repurpose it into a vermicomposting little system here. And as I add more organic matter to the this compost system here, and you can see all the tons and tons of worms right there doing their work. So it breaks this stuff down. And much like a regular compost pile, I'll flip this stuff, take the material from the bottom and flip it onto the top, probably 2 to 3 times a summer. It's not like an actual compost pile. You're trying to produce it. This is a very slow process, okay? At least in what I find to be the most successful, best way to do this. Nice and slow. Okay, it's cold. This compost is not heating up. You're not trying to break it down. There's a lot of grass clippings in here that I put on top recently. You see some eggshells in here still, some bigger pieces, some pieces of some wood and straw, some oak leaves and things like that, and even so much as this. See this right here? This is a potato. I threw some old potatoes that I probably cut up in here. They're going to sprout. Don't even worry about it. Don't pull them out. Just leave the top on it. And I should mention this does have a lid. Kind of zoom out. So it does have a lid. I keep a brick on top so rodents or someone doesn't try to get into it and eat up all the worms. But yeah, this takes a nice, long, slow approach. So what I did is I harvested about a 5-gallon bucket full of these things early this spring, and it's going to stay very moist in here. And this stuff right here, and it's still sticky, has all that nice composty worm goodness going on in there, but it still falls apart, and there's still big pieces like this wood like this. Don't worry about it. It's going to break it all down just fine. Nice and sticky. Got this worm in there. So when you do harvest your worm castings in the spring, at least that's when I do mine, I set a 5-gallon bucket aside, and I try to avoid getting as many worms as possible. There's various ways to do this, but you can go completely sterile and try to just Some people will actually heat their worm castings to just kill off everything inside of it. That's how you sell it like commercially. I don't really want to do that. I think that the natural organisms and microbes inside are doing a great job, and you want those in your soil. And where I'm not selling them commercially, I don't need to transport them or make them sterile for any purpose whatsoever. So there's that, but that's your option, I guess, if you want to do that to store them for long term. That is a possibility, I suppose. But I harvest mine in the spring and keep them in the bucket and, out of the way, but in a dry location. And after about a month or so, they're going to naturally just going to dry out until they turn to that crumbly coffee ground material like I just showed you. So I'm going to take you back to where the worm castings are at and talked about a little experiment I'm going to be running with my worm castings. So let's go check that out. All right, guys, so in front of you, what you see is right here. This is the worm castings 100%. And this is store-bought garden / flower stuff out of the bag. And right off the bat, you can tell, hopefully you can tell, the coffee grounds have a nice light crumbly appearance, very dark, almost black, like great farmland soil or something like that. And on the top here, you can look, you have little pieces of wood. There's some rocks in there. It's very brown. There's a lot of probably cocoa peat or peat moss and stuff like that mixed into it for water retention properties. So right off the bat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an experiment of just worm castings versus the store-bought material. And there's a tomato, a bean, and a collard green seed in each of these cells. And I'm just going to grow them out, and we're going to compare the results. I'll give it a month or two, so we get a nice good comparison. But there you go. So people may ask, can I just use just worm castings to grow in? Absolutely. I would recommend you mix it with other stuff. I would say something maybe more of like a peat moss or vermiculite, or the cocoa peat, because that's what's going to actually add a little bit more water retention. I do think that the one drawback of the pure worm castings will be the lack of water retention. I think it will, it'll dry out pretty quick because it doesn't have that fibrous material that will hold it like a coconut peat and or perlite, things such as that. So that's what I was trying to say. But anyways, guys, this is so easy to do. Just find yourself a little out of the way part of your yard. You can use an old cooler. Like I showed you, I was using an old kid's sandbox. As long as it has a lid, you can put a lid on it and keep it, confined like that. The worms are going to do their business. They're going to break everything down. And over time, as long as you're not in a hurry, turn your pile every now and then, get everything mixed up. It's going to compost down. And eventually, you're going to wind up with the absolute best stuff you could ever use for your garden. The best fertilizer. Look how crumbly this stuff is. I mean, that just falls apart. Hands are clean. It's not sticking to you, nothing like that. So, guys, I'm telling you, worm castings, vermiculite, stuff like that, mix it all together. It's going to give you the best possible fertilizer and best grow medium you can use for your young plants. I guarantee you, I mean, not to brag, but my peppers and tomatoes and everything this year are absolutely just going crazy. Even though it's been raining for the last 4 days and I haven't been able to get outside and take care of any of my other plants, everything is just doing amazing. And I attribute that in large part to the worm fertilizer, the worm castings, the best organic stuff you can provide for your plants. So there you go, guys. Hope you liked that. Hope that informed you. Hope that inspired you to make your own worm castings or worm compost, whatever you want to do. But I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It is nature's best kept secret. You will not be disappointed or let down. Go out there and try it, okay? So Hillside Gardener signing off here. So I'm just letting you guys know, worm castings, it's where it's at. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.